We're active in about 15 campuses, and we're growing very, very quickly. And keep in mind, this is not just a flash in the pan movement. We're going to become an institution to give them the power and the confidence to stand up and let their voice be heard. I started this organization when I was 18 years old. I decided not to go to college. I didn't get in my dream school, which was the United States Military Academy at West Point. I have this idea to galvanize and motivate the future youth of this country around a core set of ideas, not just political parties or politicians. And the ideas are really America's the greatest country in the history of the world. The Constitution is the greatest political document ever written, and free enterprise is the most assured way to lift people out of poverty and create prosperity for all. Those are the three big ideas. And I think that's something that can win.
Kirk.
If you knew him, you love him.
Charlie Kirk was an incredible man.
One of the strongest, bravest people that I know.
Charlie has the work ethic of no one I have ever met in my life. I don't think it can be understated, the impact that he had.
One of the greatest communicators of the generation.
He was more than just somebody who would comment on the news.
He genuinely respected and genuinely loved, in a Christian manner, the people on the other side of the table. He didn't hate anybody.
He would give the shirt off a back to help someone that was in need, regardless of their political stripe.
His ideas were about faith, family, freedom.
This young man with an idea that became a movement.
What he built is part of his legacy, but also part of that legacy, more importantly, is a husband and a father.
The room feels like a concert, not a conference. Bass shaking the floor. Spotlights scanning a sea of teenagers and 20-somethings. Flags wave, phones glow. Faces shine with that very specific mix of hope and anger you only see in the young. Front row, a girl in a red dress is screaming herself hoarse. She's not drunk, she's not bored, she's crying, one hand over her heart, the other clutching a paper badge that says she belongs here. This is the first time in her life anyone has told her she is the future of her country. On stage, a young man in a blazer and sneakers leans into the microphone and promises exactly that. You will save America. The crowd erupts. They chant his name like it's a password. He smiles, perfectly at ease, pacing the stage like a pastor who has rehearsed this sermon 1,000 times. Now, press pause. Who is he, really? How did a kid who never finished college end up standing above an army of kids who hang on every word? What did he have to trade to get here? Whose dreams did he borrow? Whose anger did he learn to play like an instrument? And for that girl in the red dress, the one who skipped a shift at her part-time job to be here, the one who argued with her mother about politics all summer, is he a mentor, a hero, or something closer to a very polite thief? A thief of attention, a thief of trust, maybe, in the end, a thief of her ability to ever see politics as anything except war. Those are the questions this story lives on, because this is not just about a man named Charlie Kirk. It's about the machine around him, the one that discovered a simple, brutal truth. When a generation feels betrayed, you can do almost anything with them if you're the first one who looks them in the eye and says, "You're right, they lied to you. Come with me." Someone did lie to them. Parents who promised the world would be fair. Teachers who said talent was all you needed. Politicians who sent other people's children to wars they were never asked about. Out of that mess, one boy in the suburbs looked at the wreckage and made a decision. If the game is rigged, he would stop playing it and start rewriting the rules. That part of the story sounds heroic, and in the beginning, it almost was. He grew up in safe streets and brick schools, the kind of place where dreams are supposed to be predictable. Good grades, good college, good job. But somewhere between the locker room and the lunch line, he realized those doors didn't open as easily for him as promised. Not because he was poor or excluded, but because he felt unseen. Too loud for the polite kids, too obsessed with politics for the sports crowd, too certain for teachers who preferred questions to answers. So he turned the radio louder. Radio hosts, YouTube ranters, cable news monologues, voices that didn't ask him to soften his edges. Men who spoke with the certainty of prophets and the confidence of salesmen. They were angry about the same things that bothered him. Stupid bureaucracy, arrogant professors, politicians who spoke in riddles while soldiers bled in the sand. For a lonely boy, that can feel like love. And like anyone who's finally found words for the ache in his chest, he started repeating them. School debates, church groups, local clubs. He was young, but he spoke with the certainty of someone who had memorized other men's rhythms. Some adults heard him and smiled. Here, at last, was what they'd been praying for. Not another gray-haired pundit, but a sharp-jawed kid who who could talk like talk radio and look like a college brochure, a bridge between the donors' ballroom and the cafeteria. They invited him to speak. They patted his shoulder and told him he was special. They wrote checks for travel, for events, for a new organization with a bold name and a logo that would look good on a hoodie. He said yes. Of course, he said yes. If you had been that boy feeling invisible, suddenly treated like the chosen translator between two worlds, would you have said no? This is where the story stops being simple, because from the outside, it will always look like he built it all himself. The conferences, the campus chapters, the social media empire, the dropout who beat the system and created his own. But if you look closely at those early years, another possibility appears like a watermark behind the image. Maybe he didn't just build a movement. Maybe he was built by men in back rooms who needed a fresh face for an aging ideology. Built by donors who had grown tired of paying consultants who only spoke to other consultants. Built by strategists who understood that the most powerful messenger is not the one who knows the most, but the one whose hurt looks most like the hurt in the audience. Our girl in the red dress has no idea about any of this. She only knows that when he speaks, he doesn't sound like her parents or her teachers. He sounds like the voice in her head when she's scrolling at 2 a.m., reading about layoffs, riots, wars in cities she can't pronounce, and wondering why every adult in charge seems either asleep or lying. So when he tells her that the problem is them, the professors, the media, the elites, the traitors, she believes him, not because she's stupid, but because betrayal makes you cling to the first person who promises they'll never do it again. He looks right into the camera and tells her she is not crazy, she is not alone, and that every time she has felt mocked, belittled, censored, forgotten, that wasn't an accident. Someone wanted her quiet. That moment feels like rescue. Later in this story, we'll ask whether it was rescue or recruitment, whether she was being saved or simply transferred from one owner to another, from an indifferent establishment to a very attentive machine. But right now, at the start, it feels pure, a boy from nowhere, a girl who finally feels seen, a crowd chanting that they will not be lied to again. Energy, promise, righteous anger, the perfect ingredients for either a renewal or a weapon. And somewhere in the noise, without anyone noticing, one quiet question slips past the music and lodges itself in the back of the viewer's mind. If you were that girl, standing in that crowd, would you be able to tell the difference? The first time he sees his own name on a flyer, it doesn't feel like propaganda. It feels like proof. A grainy head, a borrowed quote, young conservative speaker, one night only. The kind of thing you or I might laugh at in hindsight. But when you're 19 and the world has mostly ignored your existence, any printed validation hits like a drug. He drives 3 hours to talk to 12 people in a church basement. The air smells like coffee that's been reheated too many times. Plastic chairs, fluorescent lights, a banner left over from some youth retreat. The local organizer introduces him with the reverence usually reserved for missionaries or visiting celebrities. He gives the same talk he's given a dozen times before. Too fast, too loud, full of borrowed lines. But the old man in the front row nods along. A shy girl comes up afterwards and tells him she thought she was the only one in her class who believed this stuff. Someone slips him a folded check for gas money. Driving home in the dark, fingers tight on the wheel, he does the math. Talk for an hour, get applauded, get paid, get promised another invitation. How long before that starts to feel less like activism and more like destiny? Here's the first hidden deal in this story, the one nobody ever spells out. You give us your youth, your energy, your willingness to work for almost nothing, and we will give you something the adults in your life never managed, the feeling that you matter. It's a fair trade. At first he skips classes to make more trips. He says no to college, to say yes to conferences. Somewhere between his third cheap motel and his 10th church basement, someone asks a question that changes everything. Why are you driving around alone? Why don't you start an organization? It's a simple suggestion, but hidden inside is an invitation to step through a one-way door. As long as he's just a kid giving speeches, he can change his mind. He can go back to school. He can get bored and disappear. If he starts an organization, he becomes something else, a symbol, a brand, a vessel that other people can pour money and expectations into. He thinks about it for about 3 seconds. Of course he says yes. He's told it will be just a name. At first, a way to make fundraising easier. to sound more legitimate when calling campuses, but when the logo arrives, clean lines, bold colors, something that would look good on hats and Instagram, another deal gets made without anyone saying it out loud. You give us your face and your story, and we will build something bigger than you, with your name stamped on it. He starts introducing himself differently, not just as Charlie, but as Charlie from Turning Point. Notice the shift. He is no longer just a person. He is an extension of a thing. At the beginning, the thing is small and fragile. He drives in an old car that smells like fast food and anxiety. He lives on donated couches and lukewarm coffee. He stands at folding tables on campuses where nobody shows up. The first few chapters of his organization are just 3 friends and a Facebook page. That is a very human temptation here, one that anyone who has ever tried to build something will understand. To romanticize the struggle, he tells stories about the early days, about being laughed at, about having no money. They are true, but there's another truth running alongside them, quieter, easy to miss. Even in those scrappy years, he's not alone. There are older men who answer his emails, foundations that respond to grant applications, donors who are tired of hearing the same, stale pundits and are hungry for a fresh messenger. Every time he comes home from another demoralizing campus, visit 5 kids, 1 sneer, a stack of ignored flyers, there's an email from someone with a subject line like "Great work, keep going." Attached, another check. Have you ever noticed how much easier it is to persevere when someone keeps paying you to fail? Failure stops feeling like a warning and starts feeling like a phase. Slowly, the pictures change. The first conference is small, a bland hotel ballroom, a tired sound system, a schedule printed in black and white. He's nervous the seats won't fill. He blasts it on social media. He begs friends to come. Somehow, the room fills out enough that a camera, framed correctly, can make it look packed. He posts that clip everywhere. A bigger donor sees it and thinks, interesting. The next year, the ballroom is larger, the lights brighter, more kids, more flags, more Instagram stories. The banner behind him is no longer a cheap vinyl sheet. It's a professionally designed backdrop. There's a stage manager, a green room, sponsor logos. He tells the crowd, "We did this with hard work and grit." He's not entirely lying, but backstage, another deal is being written in invisible ink. You give us a crowd that looks big on camera, and we will turn your cause into an industry. Industry needs structure, payroll, HR, travel budgets, media teams, legal teams. He hires staff, people who put Turning Point USA on their LinkedIn and move to work for him in some anonymous office park. With every new hire, another quiet pressure lands on his shoulders. You can't stop now. You can't pivot. You can't burn out. Too many people's rent depends on you staying angry and relevant. Have you ever been in a job where your boss's breakdown would end your career? Imagine being the boss in that scenario at 22. Still, from the crowd's perspective, it's all momentum. The girl in the red dress from the beginning of our story watches the conferences get bigger each year and feels proud, as if she personally built the stage. She doesn't see the spreadsheets, the fundraising targets, the quiet panic when registration numbers dip. She only sees him, more confident, more polished, more certain, and because he tells the story of the grind so well, because he never forgets to describe the nights in cars and the small meetings, she believes that everything they are now came solely from willpower. It's intoxicating to watch someone who made it and believe you are part of their origin story. Now the machinery needs food, content, enemies, narratives. Campus visits turn from quiet conversations into filmed confrontations. A student heckles him. That clip goes viral, so every event needs another moment like that. A professor raises an eyebrow at his talking points. Suddenly, professors as a category become villains in his speeches. This is where the second hidden deal appears, this time with his audience. You give me your outrage and your attention, and I will give you people to focus it on, so you don't have to sit alone with how hurt you really are. That's not cynicism, it's survival. If every young person in those rooms had to turn their anger inward and ask, how did my own side fail me? The movement would fracture. If they had to hold the complexity of foreign wars, economic collapse, broken families and betrayed ideals all at once, they'd burn out. It's easier to outsource that complexity to a villain, the woke mob, the deep state, the professor in the clip who rolled his eyes. Some of those villains really are hypocrites. Some do talk down to their students. Some really do hate everything he stands for. That's what makes the deal so effective. There's just enough truth in the anger to keep everyone feeling righteous. Meanwhile, inside the office, inside the Slack channels, inside the planning calls for the next conference, the conversation has shifted. No one says, "How can we tell the truth?" They say, "What's going to hit? What will get engagement? Which fight will make donors open their wallets?" Do you feel the pivot? From what's right to what works. It's not unique to his operation. It's how every big modern political machine behaves once it crosses a certain size. But we're not talking about a think tank here. We're talking about a man whose main raw material is the hearts and minds of teenagers. The early Turning Point USA tables on campuses had simple slogans about free markets and small government. By the time the conferences become production heavy and the guest list fills with media personalities, the slogans mutate. Freedom turns into rage, arguments turn into memes, opponents turn into existential threats, and all along the origin story stays in the script. He keeps telling the story of the church basements, the long drives, the rejection. It's not fake. Those things happened, but they now serve a new purpose: to make everything that followed feel earned, and therefore beyond question. The bigger the machine gets, the more dangerous that little word becomes, earned. If someone has earned their platform, their influence, their wealth, then criticizing the way they used it starts to feel like ingratitude. How many times have you heard a version of this line? "He worked so hard to build this. Who are you to judge?" But what if the real question is this? If you grind long enough, do you automatically become the kind of person who should be trusted with thousands of young minds? Or do the pressures that come with that grind twist you into precisely the kind of person who shouldn't? On some level, he knows the trade he has made. He knows that every time he escalates the rhetoric, the numbers go up. He knows that the more absolute and apocalyptic his language becomes, the more kids show up with that wild mixture of fear and devotion in their eyes. He also knows that if he ever walked on stage and said, "Things are complicated, we're going to slow down," the cameras would yawn and the donors would drift. So he doesn't slow down. He speeds up. From that point on, his life is a blur of airport gates and green rooms, stages and selfies, sermons about liberty given under the watchful eyes of security guards and sponsors. The boy who wanted desperately to be seen now cannot walk through a hallway at his own events without being stopped for a photo. Every 3 steps, he got what he wanted. The moment everything truly changes isn't in a boardroom or a donor retreat. It's in a hallway, a bland fluorescent-lit corridor on some anonymous campus. On one side, a Turning Point table stacked with stickers and pamphlets. On the other, a cluster of students glaring as they walk past. A girl in headphones mutters something under her breath. Maybe it's rude. Maybe it isn't. What matters is that one of his people hears just enough of it and reaches for their phone. They've learned a new rule of this game. If it isn't filmed, it didn't happen. And if it is filmed, it can be turned into a weapon. Someone shouts a question. Someone else shouts back. A professor, tired and overworked, steps in and says something sarcastic that will sound much worse when ripped out of context and replayed a million times. The phone camera keeps rolling, always upwards, never sideways. Hours later, that shaky clip is on Twitter, on Instagram, on YouTube Shorts. The caption doesn't recount what really happened. It tells a story. Brainwashed student attacks conservative. Unhinged professor screams at free speech. Campus gone insane. Is some of that true? Sometimes, yes. There are professors who abuse their authority. There are students so convinced they're saving the world, they forget how to be decent. But here's the hinge. Reality doesn't matter once the clip is cut. By the time it hits your feed, the people in the frame have become characters in someone else's storyline. The girl in headphones isn't a person anymore. She's a villain, an avatar of everything you've been taught to hate and fear. Meanwhile, back in the Turning Point office, the metrics light up. Views spike, comments rage, donations tick upward, invitations for Charlie to come on television to respond to the latest campus meltdown multiply. A pattern is born. Soon, teams are dispatched to campuses, not just to hand out flyers but to hunt. They look for the loudest activist, the crankiest faculty member, the most explosive moment. They learn how to provoke just enough to get a reaction, then retreat behind the shield of "we're just filming" when the explosion comes. Who's at fault here? The student who snaps, the staffer with the camera, The environment that trained both to see each other as existential threats, not classmates. Easy answer. Them. Harder answer. Everyone don't in private. Some of his own people feel a pang of discomfort. They meet decent liberal students at those tables. Kids who will never end up in a viral video because they're polite and boring. They know the clips don't tell the whole truth, but uneasy consciences don't pay for plane tickets and hotel blocks. Every time a confrontation video does well, the machine learns. Every time something nuanced flops, it learns to dot. It begins to speak in the only language algorithms and donors truly understand. Keep doing what works. Stop doing what doesn't. Arguments get shorter. Slogans get sharper. The list of enemies expands. Not just the left or the media or the elites, but anyone on the right who hesitates. Moderate Republicans, old school conservatives, anyone who still talks about character and institutions, as if those words weren't already burned. This is where the story of one ambitious campus activist collides with something far bigger, because while Charlie is turning professors into content, another stormfront is rolling in over American politics. A man steps onto the national stage who knows how to do with whole countries what Charlie has been doing with campuses. Turn complex pain into simple blame, turn crowds into mirrors, turn loyalty into a test of purity. The first time Charlie hears him call the Iraq War stupid, something clicks. Here is a figure who says out loud what so many of his young followers already feel, that the adults who ran their world lied to them about war, about trade, about the future. Here is someone who does not apologize, who does not bow, who does not speak in careful consultant-tested phrases. And there's another, less comfortable truth buried under that attraction. Here is someone who can make Charlie's audience bigger than he could ever make it alone. You don't need to be corrupt to see the opportunity. You just need to be ambitious and human. If you had built a youth organization out of nothing but willpower, donors, and outrage, and suddenly the biggest show on earth appeared right next to you, asking for backup dancers, would you really walk away? He doesn't. The alignment is gradual at first. A panel here, an event there, a selfie backstage, a shared phrase in a speech. He talks about draining the swamp and fake news and the forgotten man, and his audience nods, because they've been primed for years to feel forgotten and lied to. The enemies he has spent so long naming, professors, journalists, bureaucrats, slide neatly into a larger script about globalists and the deep state. It's like watching an instrument tune itself to a louder band. Turning Point becomes more than a campus group. It becomes a pipeline. Students who might once have drifted into a dozen different factions of the right are channeled in one direction. They show up at conferences and hear not just lectures about free markets but full-throttle campaign speeches. They leave not just with ideas, but with shirts, hats, slogans, and a sense that there is one man, one movement, one side. You can feel the emotional payoff in the rooms. Young men who always felt mocked for their opinions, young women who felt outnumbered in their classes, kids whose families were torn apart by wars, opioids, job losses, divorces. For the first time, they're not just conservative students, they're soldiers in something historic. No wonder the girl in the red dress cries when he tells her she's part of saving the country. For the first time in her life, someone has explained her pain not as a personal failure, but as evidence that she was born into a rigged game. The trade becomes clearer now, for everyone involved. To the politicians who appear on his stage, it's simple. You give us your youthful energy and legitimacy, and we'll give you a fresh army of volunteers, donors, and voters. To Charlie, it's equally straightforward. You give me your image, your endorsement, your presence, and I will deliver you a generation who already speaks your language. What does the girl in the red dress get? She gets belonging, purpose, a clear list of friends and enemies, simple stories where her side is always the injured hero, never the villain. Those things are powerful. They feel like oxygen in a world that keeps telling her everything is morally gray. The danger is obvious and hard to look at. Once loyalty becomes the highest virtue, questions start to look like treason. It begins subtly. Maybe a speaker at the conference hints that the movement's chosen leader has flaws, not scandals or sins that's forgivable, but strategic weaknesses. Maybe he mishandled a crisis, hired the wrong people, trusted the wrong generals. Listen to the reaction in the room. A ripple of discomfort, a few brave nods, then a wave of defensiveness, boos, or awkward silence. People did not come here to hear about doubt. They came to have their certainty sharpened. If you've ever given your heart to someone who disappointed you, you know how much you will contort reality to avoid feeling stupid. That's what's being played with here. The movement has taken legitimate grievances, failed wars, economic betrayal, cultural humiliation, and attached all hope of repair to a single political current. Any crack in the new idol threatens to reopen every old wound, so the instinct is to patch the cracks. Instead, if he did something wrong, it's because he was surrounded by traitors. If he broke a promise, it's because the establishment sabotaged him. If he hurts us, it's still better than being hurt by them. Watch closely and you'll see the moral center of gravity shift. At the beginning of the story, the question in those rooms was, what's true? What's right? How do we fix what's broken? Now, more often, the question is this good or bad for the movement? That's not unique to this faction or this leader. It's how every personality cult across history has worked. Once the leader and the cause become the same in people's minds, criticism of one feels like betrayal of the other. In private, some of his staff see the problem. They whisper to each other that the tone is getting too apocalyptic, that the online rhetoric is spiraling, that too many kids are trading curiosity for slogans. But those whispers don't make it into the speeches. The speeches keep doubling down, because doubling down works. The cameras stay fixed on the stage, the crowd, the leaders. Almost nobody turns a lens on the quieter, more fragile stories in the background. The mother who drove her son to a conference because she thought it would teach him about economics, and brought home someone who now sees every disagreement as betrayal. The college couple who met at a turning point event, fell in love over policy debates, and then watched that bond dissolve when one of them started asking the wrong questions about the movement's chosen politicians. The young staffer who joined to defend free speech and now spends her days feeding the outrage machine, rewarding the most extreme voices because that's what the algorithm and the donors both crave. None of these people are villains. None of them are stupid. Most of them are reacting in very human ways to a world that genuinely did cheat them. But that's what makes this whole story so dangerous. When you're a magician, you don't pick the skeptical, happy, secure person in the crowd. You pick the one who wants to believe, who needs to believe. Politics isn't so different. The kids in those rooms didn't show up because they were bored. They showed up because they were bruised. And Charlie Kirkboy from the suburbs, turned CEO of Outrage, learned how to touch those bruises just hard enough to make them feel seen, and then just a little harder, until pain turned into loyalty. The next question we have to ask is uncomfortable for everyone, including you and me. At what point does speaking for the betrayed turn into using their betrayal as fuel? Where is that line? And how sure are you that, in his position, with his temptations, you would have drawn it any differently? Somewhere along the way, the music changes. It's still loud. The lights are still blinding. The crowd is still young. But now, the conference doesn't just open with an anthem. It opens with worship. Hands go up. Not just in applause, but in prayer. A band plays praise songs where, a few years before, there would have been EDM or classic rock. Verses are read. Heads bow. Then, without a clear dividing line, the sermon turns into a stump speech. One moment, Jesus is king. The next, this election will decide the fate of your faith. If you grew up in church, you know how powerful that environment is. The songs that still make you cry even after you've stopped believing. The feeling that the person on the stage is not just talking to you, but through you, to something bigger in you. Now imagine someone learns to harness that atmosphere. For politics, with the rebrand to faith and the explosion of Christian-flavored events, something subtle but massive shifts. The message is no longer just, you're a young conservative, and they hate you. It becomes, you are a young believer, and they hate you because you are faithful. God is counting on you to fight back. That's a different weight to put on a teenager's shoulders. You can see the relief in some faces. For kids whose churches went soft, whose pastors dodged every controversial topic, these conferences feel like finally, someone is willing to say what God really wants. You can also see the fear, because the moment your politics and your salvation are tied together, disagreement stops being an intellectual risk and starts feeling like a spiritual one. If you've ever questioned a belief that your entire community told you God required, you know that peculiar sick feeling in your stomach, that sense that you're not just doubting an idea, you're betraying someone. That's what the fusion creates. In one breath, speakers talk about sin and forgiveness. In the next, they talk about enemies and traitors. The cross and the flag stand side by side, and for kids in the crowd, the emotional vibration from one bleeds straight into the other. Is that entirely new? No. American politics has been flirting with the pulpit for a very long time. What feels new here is the scale and the focus. This isn't one charismatic pastor nudging his congregation. This is a national network, with media, arms, campus chapters, social feeds and donor pipelines, all teaching thousands of young people the same reflex. If someone threatens our party, our leaders, our movement, they are threatening your faith. Notice how protective that makes you feel. Then notice how easy it becomes to justify almost anything in the name of protection. Harsh words, necessary, smears and exaggerations, spiritual warfare, cutting off your non-believing or non-conservative friends, guarding your heart. You don't have to be religious to understand how dangerous that can get. All you need to know is this: when you convince someone that disloyalty equals damnation, you can own them without chains. To be fair, many of the people on those stages believe what they're saying. They're not cartoon villains rubbing their hands in the dark. They wept over cultural decline. They prayed over their own kids. They watched churches empty and institutions rot, and concluded that only a total political crusade could save what they loved. Their sincerity doesn't make the blend any less volatile, because running alongside the worship is another current that almost nobody in the crowd sees: money. Not in the crude sense of a bag of cash tossed under a table, in the quiet, respectable form of endowed chairs, foundation grants, corporate sponsorships, partnerships, and high net worth individuals in back rows watching the show. Picture the other conference, the one that happens far from the cameras, a private room in a nice hotel. No hoodies, no merch, no kids shrieking, just donors and organizers exchanging handshakes and business cards over soft jazz and expensive wine. On a big screen, someone clicks through slides, attendance numbers, follower counts, engagement metrics. How many young people registered? How many new email addresses captured? How many decisions for Christ and pledges to vote? There are no tears here, just nods. Someone asks, "What's our growth target for next year?" Someone else asks, "Which races can we move the needle on if we double this program?" A third person wants to know, "What's our retention rate? How many of these kids are ours for life?" It's not sinister, it's corporate. As the numbers go up, the checks on the table get thicker. Again, the unwritten deal. You give us a reliable stream of passionate, organized, ideologically aligned young people, and we will give you the resources to scale this into something permanent. Permanent is the key word. You can hear it in the way they talk about taking back the culture, dominating the next generation, building a parallel economy. This isn't about one election anymore. It's about constructing an ecosystem so complete that a kid can live their entire life inside it. Church, school, media, friends, conferences, even future spouse circulating within the same orbit. If you've ever been part of a tight-knit subculture, you know how comforting that sounds. An entire world where you never have to explain yourself or defend your beliefs, where everyone laughs at the same jokes and hates the same villains, but comfort can turn into captivity without anyone noticing. Which brings us to the people who pay the real price for all this, and who rarely end up in the highlight reels. The parents who drove their kids to one of these conferences because they wanted them to find good friends and stay out of trouble, and now live in a home where every dinner conversation turns into a rant about traitors and degenerates. The college roommates who used to talk about music and exams and crushes, and now tiptoe around each other because one of them came back from a summit convinced that anyone who doesn't share their politics is an enemy of God. The quiet, thoughtful kid who attended their first event, lonely and unsure, found a community, got love-bombed, memorized the talking points, and now freezes in panic whenever they privately doubt a single sentence. Yes, there are success stories. Kids who found courage, purpose, discipline, who got off drugs, found faith, became more generous and bold. Those stories are real, so are the others. The young man whose relationship with his father imploded when he started calling him a cuck for not supporting the right candidate. The girl who came out as queer to her TPUSA group and never went back, not because she stopped loving her country or her belief in God, but because she got the message loud and clear that she could not be both. The student who moved across state lines for a job at HQ full of zeal and left a year later with burnout, anxiety, and a private sense of guilt for all the times she'd helped push content she no longer believed was fair or sane. None of this fits on a poster. None of it makes for a hype video. It doesn't mean the entire project is evil. It does mean the cost is higher than anyone on stage wants to admit. If you've ever fallen into a movement that felt like home and later realized it took more from you than it gave, you already know the pattern. At the beginning, the exchange feels perfect. You give us your passion, your hurt, your loyalty, and we will give you identity, mission, and a clear map of the world. Slowly, without warning, the terms shift. You give us your relationships, your doubts, your complexity, and we will give you certainty and a place in the battle, provided you never ask whether the battle still makes sense. The most tragic part: most of the kids never see the shift. By the time they might have, they've already lost too much to walk away easily. The sunk costs aren't just time and money. They're friendships, family bonds, the version of themselves they'd have to let die if they admitted they were wrong. Look at the girl in the red dress again. If, 2 years from now, she starts to suspect she was used, what does she do with that suspicion? Tell her friends from the conference that their hero has feet of clay. Admit to her parents that they were right to be cautious. Go back to a campus where her old classmates will laugh at her for ever believing in the first place. It's not just belief that traps people in systems like this. It's the fear of humiliation. No one wants to look in the mirror and think, I gave my youth to someone who saw me as a resource. So they double down instead. They share more clips. They attend more events. They shout down more critics. And in doing so, they help tighten the net that will capture the next lonely 80-year-old who just wanted to be part of something bigger than themselves. You can condemn them. You can pity them. Or you can, uncomfortably, recognize parts of yourself in them. Because all of us, at some point, have made trades we didn't fully understand, with people who could see our fears more clearly than we could. The only real difference is scale. Most of us don't have thousands of kids chanting our name while we work out our own unresolved mess on stage. Charlie does. And as this story moves into its final stretch, the question stops being, is he a villain or a hero, and becomes something much harder. What happens to a country when this becomes the dominant template for how a generation learns to do politics, faith, and power? And what happens to you if you keep watching from the outside, shaking your head at those kids without ever asking what kind of machines are shaping your loyalties in just as subtle a way? There is a version of this story where he fades, not in disgrace, not in some explosive scandal, just in the quiet, boring way that one-surgent figures often do. The conferences continue for a few years, then get smaller. The donors move on to a shinier project. The kids who once cried in the front row grow up, get jobs, have children, and stop flying across the country to wave flags in ballrooms. In that version, the videos aged badly. The haircuts, the memes, the slogans, all trapped in a specific decade's anxieties. Future students watch them the way you and I watch old campaign ads, more curious than convinced. Commentators call him a symbol of a moment, the kind of phrase people use when they're gently consigning someone to the museum. In this future, the right learns from the excess. It looks at what turning point got right energy, youth outreach, unapologetic passion, and combines it with something it had neglected: humility, honesty about past failures, an adult willingness to say, I don't know. New institutions rise that refuse to run on permanent outrage. They build slower, pay worse, grow smaller, but they last because they respect their own followers enough not to treat them as content. Our girl in the red dress in this timeline, she remembers that conference as part of her story, not the whole of it. She looks back with a mix of nostalgia and embarrassment, the way you might remember your first teenage obsession. It mattered, it shaped her, but it didn't own her. That's one possible ending. Here's the other. In this future, Charlie Kirk is not the peak, he's the prototype. The youth conference church media donor complex he helped build becomes the blueprint. Every faction wants its own version. Every billionaire, every megachurch network, every party faction realizes that the easiest way to lock in power is to grab people before they're fully formed and give them a totalizing story they never have to leave. You think the conferences are big now. In this future, they're just the entry level. Children's curriculum, high school retreats, private academies, internship programs, housing communities, dating apps, business network. CH1 subtly encourages you to never step outside the ecosystem. It's not a conspiracy. Its demand, meeting supply. An anxious generation, traumatized by wars and economic crashes and social breakdown, wants meaning and stability. A political class, desperate to survive in a fragmented world, wants reliable foot soldiers. The exchange writes itself. You give us your children, your teenagers, your 20s, and we will give you belonging, identity, enemies, and the feeling that your life is part of an epic struggle. By the time those kids realize they were raised inside a narrative built by people with very specific interests, it's too late to fully disentangle who they might have been without it. The girl in the red dress in this timeline, she never really leaves. She becomes a chapter leader, then a staffer, then a speaker. Her entire adult life from 18 to 35 is conferences and content and campaigns. Her friendship circle is entirely inside the movement. Her future spouse is someone she met at a summit. Her income depends on donors staying satisfied and followers staying angry, even if something deep inside her starts to whisper, this is not what faith, patriotism, conservatism was supposed to feel like. What does she do with that voice? Walk away and lose everything? Stay and lose herself? In that future, men like Charlie aren't aberrant. Their job titles: influencer evangelist, youth mobilization director, head of generational engagement. Different names, same function: hold the crowd, keep the kids, make sure nobody gets quiet long enough to ask, is this really about the country, or is the country a backdrop for someone else's project? Most dystopias on film show you tanks and riots. The more likely ones look like this: well-produced events, heartfelt speeches, tears, worship songs, patriotic music, charismatic leaders who are absolutely certain of everything, and followers who mistake certainty for truth. If that sounds melodramatic, ask yourself a small, sharp question. When was the last time you saw a political leader on any side rewarded for admitting a mistake, dampening hysteria, or telling their followers, calm down, breathe, think? Now remember that every one of these youth machines is measuring, testing, optimizing to give people more of what gets rewarded and less of what doesn't. It isn't just them. It's the environment all of us have built and tolerated. At this point, the story could easily slide into pure blame. Look what he did. Look what they did. Look what those kids let happen to them. That's the easy move. It's also the one that guarantees nothing changes. So instead, we're going to do something much ruder. We're going to turn the camera around. Imagine, just for a second, that everything in this film freezes. The conference stage hangs mid-jet. The worship band suspends on a single held note. The donors in their private room pause. Wine glasses lifted halfway. The campus confrontations stop with mouths open, hands raised. Everything and everyone we've met in this story becomes a still frame. Except you. You keep moving. You're the only one left in motion, standing there with a simple, bitterly uncomfortable privilege. You get to decide what any of this means to you, not to the right or the left, or the church or the movement. To you, you might be tempted, right now, to say, well, I'm not one of those kids. I'd never fall for that. Really, think about the first time someone truly spoke into your anger and made it feel noble. The influencer, the preacher, the writer, the politician, the YouTuber who articulated your resentment so perfectly that you felt almost high listening to them. Did you fact-check every word? Did you hunt down their funding sources? Or did you, for a little while, just enjoy feeling less alone? We all have our Charlies. They don't all wear blazers and stand under red, white and blue lights. Some stand behind pulpits with different flags. Some wear lab coats. Some sit in news anchors' chairs. Some look like activists or artists or dissidents. The details change. The dynamic doesn't. Give me your wounded parts, and I will give you a story that explains them. The danger is never the existence of stories. Human beings cannot live without them. The danger is when we stop asking, who benefits if I keep believing this one? That's where this particular story stops being about one man or one organization and starts being about something much more frightening. How easily a generation in pain can be captured by whichever machine reaches them first. If you're angry at him now, that's fine. May be useful. Anger can be clarifying. But if you stop there, you'll miss the point. Because Charlie Kirk, in the end, is not a sorcerer. He's a salesman who understood the market. The deeper question is, why was that market so hungry for what he was offering? And in your own life, who's selling you versions of the same deal? You give me your trust, your time, your outrage. and I'll make sure you never have to sit with the possibility that some of your enemies might be human, some of your allies might be wrong, and some of your wounds might not have villains attached to them at all. Would you take that deal? Have you already? Somewhere, the frozen image of the girl in the red dress starts to bother you, not because she's naive, but because she looks familiar. Maybe you see yourself at 16, chanting at a protest. Maybe you see your brother, who vanished into some online rabbit hole and came back speaking in memes. Maybe you see your own kid, eyes shining in the glow of a screen, repeating someone else's phrases with total conviction. You don't get to rewrite her story. You don't get to go back in time and tap the boy from the suburbs on the shoulder. Tell him to slow down, to read more, to resolve his own confusion before weaponizing everyone else. You only get one thing: the next choice you make about who you trust, who you amplify, who you give your anger and your hope to. Maybe that's a small thing, a comment you don't leave, a clip you don't share, a conference you don't attend, a book you read from someone you disagree with, just to see if your certainty can survive contact with another mind. Or maybe it's bigger. Maybe it's quietly refusing to let any leader turn your faith into a campaign slogan, refusing to let any movement turn your children into content, refusing to let any side trick you into believing that loyalty is more important than truth. In a few minutes, this video will end. The algorithm will tempt you with something simpler: a rage clip, a dunk, a scandal, a soothing voice telling you that the problem is all on the other side. You can click, or you can sit, for just a moment, with the most subversive question of all. If a lonely, ambitious kid from the suburbs can build a machine powerful enough to script what thousands of young people think truth and courage look like, what kind of machine are you going to build in your own mind to make sure you stay free? Maybe the most unsettling part of this whole story is how ordinary it is. A boy wants to matter. A girl wants to belong. Adults want to win. Put those three desires in the same room. Add money, lights, and a country in slow-motion crisis, and you don't need a mastermind. You just need time. Strip away the branding, the flags, the Bible verses, the buzzwords, and what's left is brutally simple. If you can name people's pain before anyone else does, they will follow you a very long way before they notice where you're taking them. He learned that young, she learned that late. You're learning it now. The next election will come and go. The next wave of outrage will crest, crash, and be replaced by another. Names that feel inescapable today will be trivia questions tomorrow. What will still be here long after Charlie Kirk and this particular movement are footnotes is the pattern. Someone will always be ready to look at a frightened, angry generation and say, "They betrayed you." I won't. They lied to you. I'll tell you the truth. They used you. I will give you your country, your faith, your future back. And behind that promise, there will always be a ledger, a column for what they're willing to give, and a much longer column for what they plan to take. The only real defense you have is noticing the ledger before you sign. Before we go, let me offer you one last honest exchange. You've just spent nearly an hour inside a story that didn't flatter you, that didn't hand you easy heroes or villains, that refused to pretend this was all the fault of those people over there. If you stayed until now, it's because some part of you is tired of being treated like a pair of eyeballs to be harvested. So here's the deal. If you want more work like this, harder, messier, willing to cut into every side, including the ones you sympathize with, then don't. Just click away and hope the algorithm guesses. Tell it. Subscribe to Golden History USA. Hit the notification bell so these don't drown under louder, dumber noise. And in the comments, don't just scream based or cringe. Write one thing you're now less sure about than when you clicked this video. That's the only real currency that scares any machine. People who come out of a story with more questions than they went in with. You don't owe me agreement. You don't owe me loyalty. You don't owe me a pledge. What you owe yourself, after watching how easily one ambitious kid and a hungry ecosystem captured a piece of a generation, is this: refuse to give your attention to anyone who won't show you the costs of following them. Not just their enemies' costs, your costs, your family's costs, your country's costs. In the next films, we're going to keep tracing this same pattern through other names, other movements, other saviors you're being sold on the right, on the left, in churches, in corporations, in every place where fear and hope can be converted into power. If you want to see those before the spin doctors tell you what to think about them, Stay with us, because long after this particular crowd stops chanting, long after the girl in the red dress hangs her badge in a drawer and forgets where she put it, long after the boy from the suburbs steps off the stage for the last time, one question will still be waiting for you at the edge of every new movement and every new messiah. When they say, "Give me your trust, your youth, your outrage, and I will give you back your future," are you absolutely sure you know which side of that trade you're on?
We're going to become an institution to give them the power and the confidence to stand up and let their voice be heard. I started this organization when I was 18 years old. I decided not to go to college. I didn't get my dream school, which was the United States Military Academy at West Point. I have this idea to galvanize and motivate the future youth of this country around a core set of ideas, not just political parties or politicians, and the ideas are really America's the greatest country in the history of the world, the Constitution is the greatest political document ever written, and free enterprise is the most sure way to lift people out of poverty and create prosperity for all. Those are the three big ideas. And I think that's something that can win. We've come a long